1992 from Ariel Vroman. It's a crime drama about a father protecting his son and a heist going down during the Rodney King riots. In this movie, we follow Mercer, played by Tyrese Gibson. He's a single father working for a metal company in LA that's in possession of a wealth of platinum. This piques the interest of a family of thieves that plan a heist during the first night of the infamous 1992 Los Angeles riots. Mercer tries to find his son amidst the chaos covering the streets so that he can return to his job where there's unfortunately more danger waiting for him. This movie has a couple of subjects it touches on. I think the slightly more important but subtle one is tyranny. It's about the unfortunate mishandling of power over others. More specifically, it's about the ways that people try to command respect from others, blind to the fact that they're actually just evoking fear in others and then mistaking their obedience for respect. This is true about the way that Mercer approaches raising his son after some time they've spent apart. But it also speaks to the experiences some individuals face dealing with corrupt law enforcement, which of course relates to the incident that caused these riots. So I'd really like to think that most of you are quite familiar with the Rodney King riots that took place in 1992, but if you are not, the TLDR is there were 4 police officers who had beaten a man named Rodney King to a pulp upon his arrest in 1991. They were tried in court for their crimes the following year, but they were shockingly found innocent, resulting in 6 days of riots and bedlam for the city of LA in the wake of this verdict. This event made its mark by becoming one of the most catastrophic occurrences of citizen upheaval in American history. So this movie takes place on the first night of the riots. The first act sets the stage for the riots and also the characters. Beyond that, we follow Mercer while he's trying to find his kid in the violent streets of LA. Meanwhile, we follow a family and their heist at the metal factory, led by Lowell, played by the late Ray Liotta. These 2 story fragments might sound pretty disjointed, because they were, for most of the movie at least. It felt like we were following 2 stories that had almost nothing to do with each other. Of course, with the heist happening at Mercer's job, this creates some suspense around the inevitable confrontation that will ensue when the 2 stories intersect. There wasn't a whole lot of suspense there though, because the 2 stories had their own conflicts within them. It doesn't feel like a pressure cooker waiting for their paths to cross, because they just feel like completely separate events that don't feel like they're contributing to the same story overall. Mercer and his son are part of a story with lots of commentary on socio-political conflicts, including race and counterviolence. And then Lowell and the boys are just pulling off a heist. They just want to get rich. To clarify, each of them had interesting elements. It was just strange that they had comparable screen time considering that they had different themes. As far as the heist goes, not the most interesting one logistically, but the dynamic between the characters made it interesting. Lowell has his 2 personal hires, his 2 sons, and the eldest son's close friend running the operation with him, and things don't go very smoothly for them even before they meet Mercer. They make an interesting bunch because they all have very different relationships, and you just don't know how loyal they really are to one another. You don't know how much the 2 close friends value that relationship, you don't know how much Lowell actually cares about his kids, and you don't know how honorable his own 2 guys are. There's always a question of how much honor there is among thieves here, and that really gives the movie some thrills. Lowell himself was incredibly menacing thanks to a standout performance from Ray Liotta. His scumbag leadership and his mean mug made him an absolute delight. From what I found, I believe this was Liotta's last performance before his death in 2022. We kept seeing him make post-mortem appearances in films to the point of meme potential, but I think this was his last performance, and it's a really good one. His presence in this film really gave it some much-needed edge. On the flip side, Lowell's son, played by Scott Eastwood, he took some warming up to. I really wasn't crazy about him for his first couple of scenes. I'm not sure if it was performance issues or perhaps just an awkward casting choice, but he just didn't really feel like an authentic criminal. He does gradually start to fill those shoes a little bit better over time though. Meanwhile, Mercer and his son Antoine are doing the real work by being part of what actually made us want to see this movie. They are experiencing the riots. Of course, the biggest thing this movie needed in order to justify being about the Rodney King riots was to have some sort of dialogue around whether or not they were wrong. And it does. This is obviously where the movie will lose a lot of people, depending on where you stand on subjects like civil unrest. There are some exchanges you might find triggering. I am not here to debate those topics, I am just here to review a movie. I will simply say that if you have a hard time hearing movie characters express notions that you disagree with around controversial topics, you probably won't enjoy this movie. But if we're being honest, the inclusion of that dialogue should not come as a surprise. If you decide that you're gonna make a movie within the setting of the 1992 LA riots, you can't not include some sort of commentary about them. Otherwise, you could just write the script around some fictional or non-specific riots. Using the setting of a real, controversial historical event should prompt some sort of discussion about it. This discussion is really only in one scene, but it's the scene that really ties a bow on the whole riot story before it converges with the heist story. So once the two families finally meet face to face, the movie seems to just utterly forget that it was ever about the Rodney King riots. From here, it's just another action-y crime flick. The conclusion of the movie was generally fine, but when all was said and done, it just didn't really feel like it explored its premise enough. And this movie does have some little hiccups here and there. For example, Team Ray Liotta was initially reluctant to go on the heist, and their decision to go forward with it was a little bit puzzling. We can use our heads to piece together why without being spoon-fed the reason through stilted dialogue, but it just wasn't explicitly clear. I think I would have preferred some sort of clear explanation. Also, I don't want to give the movie too hard of a time for this, but I just feel like the riots could have been depicted to be a little bit more hectic. They were chaotic, but it was only like a 7 out of 10. With the setting of the film being the hook, I just feel like they could have dialed it all the way up. So the movie's strongest themes felt underexplored, but it still had enough to say that it was interesting and entertaining. It's a passable and gritty crime flick that has things to enjoy, even if it feels a little bit unfinished. This movie had enough going for it that I can say that it's decent. I don't personally think that it's a rush to the theater watch, but if you do decide to see it in theaters, you might enjoy yourself. But of course, if for any reason at all you are not prepared to watch a movie commenting on things like race and socio-political violence, then this one is not for you. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my review of Beetlejuice Beetlejuice.